Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. I am your host, DBQ Hams. We've got a lot to talk about. It is fall, which means we've got not only game releases, but this week we've had some news as well and some announcements. So, plenty to talk about. And joining me tonight, wow, I have been gone for 2 weeks. So, thank you for it's nice to be back in the chair. Thank you both for keeping things, as always, alive, flourishing, deep, insightful discussion, or just filling some air time. So, doing that again tonight with me is Towmaster99. How are you, Tow?
I can fill air like nobody else. I'm doing well.
Excellent. That is good. It is nice to be able to fill some. Yeah, I'm gonna stop that.
You can go on.
There we go. And also on the boards over here is Lee. How are you, Lee?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
A man of few words until he has a soapbox, and then step back, everybody, and give him some time to preach because there's more to talk about.
Yeah, I momentarily forgot how to which control was unmuting my mic in the setup. So
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. As we always do here on Enough to Keep Going, we are going to talk about some of our newest games that we've been playing. Then we'll dive into the week's news, give some highlights, some analysis, and wrap things up at the end of the show with other games that we've been playing, things in our backlog, things that we're keep kind of chipping away at as well. So I am going to start over with Tao with the highest profile game, AAA release, mature rated title, Disney Dreamlight Valley. So, Tao, first off, are you playing this just because it's free? Or is there an Animal Crossing itch that this is scratching? How are you playing it with your kids? How, talk to us about what is Disney Dreamlight Valley and how many hours have you sunk into harvesting flowers for Belle already?
That's a good question. I'll have to look that up as I'm talking here. But yeah, so Dreamlight Valley, it is basically Animal Crossing, but with Disney characters. So you create your own character at the beginning, and there's a decent amount of customization to your character. It's not super large. It's probably on par with Animal Crossing. They didn't give you a whole lot of choices, but it's decent. And then you're kind of thrown out into this valley, this world where just like Animal Crossing, you could do these odd jobs, around the area, but you're also kind of unlocking areas. So right now, I've only unlocked one other area, or well, a couple areas. It's a little confusing to kind of explain that part of it. There's like a main hub world that you're on, and there's like different areas there you can unlock, and not necessarily like Disney themed in those areas. They're just kind of more like, hey, this is kind of a swampy area. This is a beach. I haven't seen some of the other areas. I've only done the ones so far. So you can do that, and then there's other Disney worlds you can go to. Like the first one I unlocked, and this was after like a couple days that I had been playing it. I unlocked the Wally world, or Wally's version of Earth, I guess. So it's kind of like just a garbage area, but that it's pretty small. So I don't know if those Disney areas are going to be that kind of small, like this one, or if depending on who you pick, maybe it'll be a little bit bigger. But basically, you want to do stuff for those Disney characters to bring them back into the main hub world, and it's kind of part of the story. So I don't want to give too much away,
Thank
but
you
yeah,
for not spoiling the nail
that's
biting
right.
conclusion of Disney Dreamlight
Well,
Valley.
I don't want to give away too much lore in this game. So, but no, that's basically the gist of it. So instead of villagers like in Animal Crossing, random animals and stuff, it's going to be Disney characters. Like you start off with like Mickey and Goofy and not Donald Duck, Scrooge McDuck, and Merlin. So they're kind of like the
So
main.
does Scrooge play the Tom Nook role of like overcharging you for everything and having you pay interest on things?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, as far as I've seen, I haven't seen any interest, but you do have to pay for like upgrades, and you even have to pay for. Obviously, I shouldn't say you have to, but obviously you have to pay for like the cosmetic stuff and furniture and stuff like that. Yeah, so he's basically the Nooks, the Nooks of the world here, and his prices are pretty steep on some things, which I was kind of surprised. Some things that I thought would be cheap are like super expensive, like some of the clothing, but those are the Disney themed clothing, so I guess those are more expensive. But
A duck's
I
got to
haven't.
keep up his swimming pool. Come on, how's he
He
going to
needs
get that
that.
money?
Yeah, he has to keep that big bank of gold coins so he can swim around in. So, what's he gonna do? But no, I was kind of shocked by that though. Really. Now, one thing I didn't realize, or maybe I forgot, this is basically early access. This game right now, even though you can't pay for it. I mean, well, I guess even early access games you can't pay for it, but I think it's full price. I believe normally. But I like you mentioned, I got it on Game Pass, so it's free. So I'm just playing it through that. I probably would have bought it anyways, just because I like those Animal Crossing type of games, and I bought other ones like Stardew Valley, and stuff like that. So it's kind of in my wheelhouse, kind of just nice, chill. There's nothing super, complicated you got to do in this game. It's just kind of doing a little bit of fetch quests and find certain like flowers and gems and minerals and stuff, all this other kind of things. But I'm liking it so far. I mean, it's fun. I like it.
So is it doing
Right.
anything different for you than Animal Crossing does, or is it just the pacing is different, the characters are different, so it feels like a new experience?
Uh, Definitely. Well, the thing with I was gonna say Nook with Scrooge McDuck is there's no like you don't have to pay like a lease. You just kind of it's like a lump sum that you have to pay at the times. So that's kind of nice. Some of the UI stuff is really nice too. Some of it's not so nice. Maybe I'll get into that a little later. But um, I'm trying to think. There was one other thing I was going to bring up that kind of made it better than Animal Crossing. I can't remember right now, but for the most part, yeah, it's kind of a more refined Animal Crossing as far as kind of like how you do the missions and just kind of a little bit of the menus too and stuff. So it does a good amount better than Animal Crossing does. Um, and yeah, I think the one major thing is you don't have to. There's not that lease that you kind of have over your head at this whole time. It's more. It kind of is more of the story stuff. I mean, even though it's not like super complicated or anything like that, or super rich story, but it's kind of simple. But still, it's kind of kind of interesting. Just kind of figuring out what happened in this land where all these characters are kind of weird. All these characters are living now, but yeah, it's a good time so far. Like I said, I always like these kind of games, and I can see myself, and I've been playing this exclusively on Xcloud, even when I've been playing on my console or my PC. I just stream it through Xcloud. It's nothing super complicated, so it's not twitchy or anything like that. The first few days actually I was playing it just on my phone. I'd go in there, do some of the the first basic missions that you had to do, and it was pretty easy. So that's kind of a nice game just to throw on your phone.
Does it have touchscreen support for cloud?
I don't believe so. Um, like I said, this is early access, so maybe down the line they might add that later. But I'm pretty sure it doesn't right now. So, but the thing about the early access too, which I was kind of surprised. I mean, it seems pretty good, pretty complete. The one major thing I've seen is this only happened like twice so far out of the I don't know 3 4 day 5 days that I've been playing it. There's been a couple times where it kind of locked up on me. A couple times when I was playing on PC though, I had like switched off the game to look up something and came back and it kind of locked up then. I was like, well, maybe it's just because they don't have that optimized or something maybe yet. Another time, the first time though, I was just playing in the game. I was behind like one of the buildings, just picking up stuff, and all of a sudden I just like locked and like I couldn't move. Like I can move the camera around myself, but I couldn't move my character. I couldn't get into any menus, so I just had to quit out of the game, come back in. So I mean, there's that kind of thing. But like I said, it's early access, so there's no multiplayer. You had mentioned about playing with kids, but there is no multiplayer right now. Hopefully, maybe in the future, at the very least, maybe you can like trade stuff or like somehow do like those dreamscapes like you used to do in Animal Crossing, where you can like visit a world or something like that. So, but for right now, it's just single player, which kind of stinks. But hopefully in the future they'll add that or some kind of component, multiplayer component. So, um, but yeah, other than that, there is some kind of hokiness with the UI, a little bit in the UI where you can't like when you're putting stuff away or taking stuff out. It's just like it's either you could split it and then you could put it in, or you just have to put the whole thing in. So it's just kind of things like kind of little small things like that. It's a little more annoyances than anything. So, um, but I've been having a pretty good time. And this is done by Gameloft, which, if people don't know, they kind of they're more like mobile game stuff. Like they've done Asphalt. I think 9 is the newest one that's out now. They're doing like racing games and just kind of mobile type games with that. So I was kind of surprised this isn't on mobile too. I mean, graphics aren't super complicated. It's nothing I can't see that couldn't be on mobile. So maybe in the future that's going to be, but for now it's just on consoles and PC as far as I've seen.
Okay, so let's go from an Animal Crossing also ran to a Pokemon also ran. So you've been playing another release this week, which is TemTem. TemTem has been out in early access on PC for over a year or so at this point, but it just hit 1.0 and came to consoles this week. So you picked it up on Switch, it looks like.
Yes, I got it on Switch, and yeah, I mean it's basically like just old school Pokemon games, like the original ones. You're going around in this world, you're your kid going on this world, and you have to gather these creatures. I mean, it's nothing. Talk about not having a story. I mean, it's like pretty much carbon copy of Pokemon, other than just like some of the wording. And instead of a Pokeball, you have like these crystal, like cards or discs that you carry around to capture them and carry them around. So I've only
How's the
played
battle system?
it's pretty much the same. I mean, it's turn based. You go in the back, and or they might go first, depending on if their speed's faster or whatever. But I mean, it's pretty much Pokemon, like as far as I've seen. The one major difference with this one is you can play with others if you want, so you can party up and go through the story. I haven't done that yet, so I don't know if when you do that, if you're actually going through the story or if you're just like kind of in the world and you can like battle the different creatures, the different temtems in the world. So I definitely want to try that part out at least, and just to see if you can further the story when you're doing that, and how that actually works. Like, are you just doing like yours, if you're doing the other person's, or how does that actually work? I'm assuming it's probably, if you do a story, it's probably like kind of you both go through it, I guess. I don't know.
Does it
I'll have
have
to
the
check it
same
out.
type of kind of rock, paper, scissors mechanics in terms of, you know, grass, fire, water, dark light type of thing?
Yeah, there's the same like rock paper scissors. You start off, I think it's like crystal, mind, or I think they call it mental in this one. It's kind of weird. And I forgot what the other one is. Crystal, mind, and then it might have just been fire, like one of the main elements of Pokemon, but they don't have like the regular like grass, fire, and they call it different a little bit here and there, but at least that I've played so far, I played it like the first 2, maybe 3 days that I've started, that I got it, and then I kind of like dropped off because I've been playing Disney and another one I'll be talking about later. So I haven't had a whole lot of time, but I pretty much just gone through basically a tutorial and then like a couple of missions or quests after that. So I definitely want to jump back more into this though, and kind of play the multiplayer part of it, try to see how that works out.
Yeah, I'll be curious to hear more about it. I've been watching
Yeah.
it in early access, but haven't had a chance to, or haven't picked it up yet. So,
Yeah, and I think there's supposed to be like events too that you can, all battle in and stuff like that. So that should be pretty cool.
all right, Lee, let's move over to you. Let's take things on the road. It looks like you've been for your American Truck Simulator discussion.
Yeah, there isn't that much to discuss about the game itself, but I just need to see Tower Master's one Nintendo Switch and raise him a Stream Deck. So Stream Deck finally came in, and American Truck Simulator, and I'll go ahead and talk about Grid at the same time as well. Were the first things that I got into. I've also loaded Fear and one other shooter, I think, but yeah, those were the first things I went after. Surprisingly, somewhat surprisingly, I mean, America's Truck Simulator works fine. I say surprisingly because that game, I typically don't run with VSync on, because typically my GPUs are fast enough to keep up with whatever game. But that is a game where if you don't have VSync turned on, you will get like a weird whining from your graphics card. So fortunately, it doesn't do that on the Stream Deck. So, in fact, I'm not even sure. I got to dig through settings. I'm not even sure if VSync comes up as an option on Steam Deck. In some cases, it seems like certain graphic options that you would normally have on games aren't there on Stream Deck, either because of tailoring for that specific chipset or GPU or some other reason. But American Truck Simulator is a pretty awesome handheld experience, and kind of just like I discovered with the OLED, with the Nintendo Switch OLED, I was really surprised to find that I actually like playing the Stream Deck in handheld mode. Now, so the dock isn't available yet, so I don't have a dock to connect it to a monitor. I did grab a HD, but the problem that creates is sometimes there will be things on the UI that are not clickable, right? Because at the end of the day, and this is why I balked about getting a Stream Deck in the first place. At the end of the day, these aren't games made for Linux. They're Windows games running on top of an abstraction layer, the abstraction layers that already exist in video games. And so there's always going to be some degree of wonkiness. And so, for instance, when I played Grid, Grid's an older game. When it initially comes up, there is a splash page for OpenAI, which is actually an old audio codec, which is still runs via backwards compatibility. But when this came up on the screen, there wasn't any way for me to tab into or use the controls because I was playing it on an external monitor to get into the accept licensing agreement. So I wound up having to pull the cable to get it back onto the local Steam Deck screen, and then use the touch controls. Because again, even on the Steam Deck screen, there wasn't any way, right, via the physical controls that I was able to tab into that box. So, but American Truck Simulator also works well from a control perspective.
Right, so we're having some technical problems here. So if you are joining us, oh, there's some crickets. All right. So Lee, you're back there.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. I see you guys all of the time. You guys are locking up on me periodically on the Discord call.
Run in and see what the show looks like on the way. So I have a question on Grid. If you're hearing me, was it listed as compatible since you were talking about kind of the interface, or was it one of those that for things in terms of, or if that hasn't been rated at all? Sometimes there's still games out there that don't have a Steam Deck kind of functionality to it. Where was Grid rated, or did you notice anything there? And that might be related to kind of the interface issues you were having.
Yeah, so what you'll find with the games is just about every game has some type of caveat to it. Like there's almost no game that's listed as 100% compatible. There will always be even a slight caveat thing like, it is possible that text may be too small, right? Because, I mean, even with more modern software, right, there's always the potential for text to not scale correctly. Like I said, basically every game has some detractor to it almost. But otherwise, right, it played fine. It's just that you may have to, encounter things like that. Now, when you go to it, once my dock gets here and you go, so there are lots of third-party docks, and I ordered one that, everybody has said works well. It's a paradigm strewn with landmines in that there are lots of docks, and I haven't not exactly certain. I didn't have enough time to really dig into all the reading. What the big thing that people run into is they get a dock and it won't charge the Steam Deck. And so that's a big problem because if you're sending it to an external monitor, the GPU is probably working a little harder than it normally would go to its own screen. And so people want to be able to charge it. I have heard people say that it bricks their Steam Deck. Now, I don't think, I haven't, they say that, but then they continue on indicating that they're still using it. So I haven't been able to ascertain if what they really mean is that if they run into a charging problem that the Steam Deck just won't charge while it's on the dock, or if the Steam Deck just won't charge over USB-C anymore at all. That is obviously a problem. In most cases, what I've seen people report is that the workaround or the way to do it is to attach the USB-C first and then plug the dock in. Now, normally, with almost all electronics, that is what I always do anyway, right? Because I feel that's a prudent way to take care of electrical equipment. But I will admit, when I have a dock that's sitting there, right, that's plugged in, I don't like constantly unplug it and then put the device on it and then plug the dock back in. So that is one use case paradigm where I check what the reports are with that dock before I actually hook it up. But these glitches or whatever that you kind of see with screens, I'm not absolutely sure. When I hooked the Steam Deck up to the adapter that I have, the display just completely, like, there was no Steam Deck display. It just sent the display to the external monitor. Now, I don't know if there's a way to work around that so that I get a display on the Steam Deck as well as on the monitor. When you're in big picture mode, it's running Steam, so you actually have to exit out of Steam to get to the Arch Linux desktop. Now, obviously, on the Arch Linux desktop, I could, set up dual screens, but I don't know if you can easily configure to do that and run from big picture mode itself. And that's the key thing. Like, a lot of people, like most of the people that I see, obviously, the Steam Deck has had a lot of uptake with a lot of people who run various homebrews and emulators and whatnot. For me, I don't have time to do that. I maintain a bunch of PCs as it is, and so this is going to be me utilizing the device as pretty essentially a COTS device. But when I was mentioning about controls, it's really surprising how controls feel somewhat more intuitive when you're using them on that gamepad on either side of the screen. Kind of arrangement. I mentioned while playing Ollie Ollie World that controls felt a little better and felt a little tighter when playing with the Nintendo Switch in handheld mode. Although my hands fatigue a little bit quicker, but in general it feels a little more. I feel it seems a little more instinctive. And same thing with American Truck Simulator. If you've never played it, is a very you really have to wrap your brain around relative motion in a way that, again, most human beings don't, in order to understand like which way you turn your wheels to back the truck up, to turn the trailer, which actually is like three different sets of vectorial math. So it's it's a little hairy and it's really interesting. But I, after not having played it for months, I jumped on it on the Steam Deck. And completed the first mission, right, backing the trailer into, and when you arrive at your destination, you get like 3 loading challenges, right? You can pick most challenging, medium challenge, and no challenge at all, which basically you just drive to the first little floating icon above the road, or above the parking lot, right, and drop your cargo. But I picked like the most challenging one, which actually requires you to go around to the back, right, of the warehouse, like park the thing, and back the trailer into the loading dock, and
like you would in real life.
Right. And it's never in a convenient parking spot. But I was able to pull that off like the first time. One thing that I can tell is going to be the struggle in a game like American Truck Simulator, where there's tons of different controls. At the time, I just didn't have a chance to like dig through all the controls and how those are mapped right to a gamepad, because that's not a game that I usually play with a gamepad, right? I break out a wheel and pedals for that. And so when the control schemes get really complicated, it's going to be interesting to see how the Steam Deck like maps those, because it's not just mapping it to a standard gamepad, right? There's the D-pad, the little mouse pad things that simulate the mouse. And then there's, shoulder buttons and everything else. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that turns out.
Nice. All right. I have picked up NBA 2K23. Came out on Friday. I haven't played a whole lot, but for the first time for the last 3 or 4 years. I haven't jumped right into my career. NBA 2K23 has the Jordan challenges are back. There's 15 different Jordan challenges. It moves through different eras. And they also have the eras kind of franchise where you can start in 1982, 1994, 93, somewhere around there, 2000, 2002, and then the modern era. So kind of Magic Bird era, a Jordan uh, era in the 90s, a Kobe era in the early 2000s, and then the modern era. And one of the fun things about it is the kind of graphical filters that they put on, and so those graphical filters are a little different. The 80s era definitely feels like I should be turning my television set connected, in a big wooden cabinet that has a nice doily on top of it, and it's got some nice little technicolor glow and some fuzziness on everything. And then in the 90s, that kind of high contrast goes away and it still has some artifacting, but it's a little muted, a little more brightness in your display setting. And then the 2000s is pretty similar to the modern era, just not quite fully 4K. So I've had a chance to kind of dive in, start a franchise in each of those just to play around with what those graphical settings through the years map out and continue. About it is it gives you historic teams and locations, so teams that no longer exist are back. Teams that haven't relocated yet start there, and you can kind of start your own franchise and rewrite history in a way. The historical draft classes are there, so there's a lot of meat there. And I think that's my biggest takeaway after playing this weekend is this is a game that always has had a lot of meat to it, but it's often felt like most of that content is heavily tied to virtual currency, to VC. That either you're playing My Career and you're in the park or the city and playing against other people and, ranking up and getting VC to upgrade your skill points, or you're playing My Team, which is the ultimate team version of NBA 2K, which again is tied to packs and purchasing packs and things like that. But with all the other, the WNBA franchise, the four different eras, the Jordan challenges, there's a lot more here for somebody who picks up the game at, just a standard price game and doesn't want to invest in microtransactions. And so I think that that's a real bonus to this year. The gameplay itself, there's a few changes to the shot meter. I'm still kind of learning some of those. But also, one of the other changes is in the Ultimate Team. For a number of years, you've had to, as you have your cards, your team, every game they play, it expires a contract. And so you would be unlocking contracts or purchasing contracts, or as you open packs, you'd get more contracts to add to those. It the more you played, you really didn't have to worry about expiring contracts because you'd eventually keep getting more and more, but it became kind of just this extra step of maintenance. And so this year that's all gone. If you have a player, you have them forever. And so that's a nice kind of accessibility. It really feels like this year is more accessible than the last few. The on-court gameplay, see what people are complaining about the defense in terms of some of the releases that have always been challenging in zone and man coverage. But again, it's a solid game with so much content, and I'm really looking forward to keep diving into it. So that is NBA 2K23. We talked about Lee's experience on the Steam Deck with Grid and American Truck Simulator, Tao's experience with his Nintendo adjacent games with TemTem and Disney Dreamlight Valley. The one other game that I've been playing here, it ties in with our first news story, which is Torchlight Infinite. It is now in an open beta. It comes out in full release on Android and iOS and also PC in October. It's been announced for a while. It's been in closed betas. I've played it in closed betas. Now playing it in open beta is the first time that we see kind of what the microtransactions, what the monetization models look like. And that's also our first news story in terms of that it is Torchlight by way of Path of Exile and Diablo Immortal. It is different than the Torchlights that have been on PC and ported to consoles. It feels very much in that same light, but it is also, so far right now, the monetization models are really about pets and cosmetics. That, unlike Diablo Immortal, where a lot of the monetization was tied to legendary crests and the ability to upgrade your gems, which then give you greater power in the PvP aspects, right now the community on Reddit is probably the biggest concerns in terms of pay to win here are with some of the legendary pets and the perks that they can provide you. But it seems like there's still some tweaks going on, obviously, because they've got a month to release. But that is our first news story. And we'll move. This is Torchlight has been previously done by Runic Games, and this one is by XD. It's a Chinese company, which also heads us into our next news story. And Lee, I'm going to let you take this one. This is about the US announcing and kind of putting a freeze on technology, building factories, US companies building factories in China around advanced technology and microprocessors.
Yep. So obviously, lots of people are aware of the CHIP Act, which was recently signed, right? And so, what a lot of people, I think, what sometimes gets missed or maybe isn't kind of clear to everyone is, the CHIP Act is not like a single big bang like event, right? It's not money that got authorized, money that's going to go out, and everybody's going to be fine, dumb, and happy, and will go on about their business and just make lots of chips. And so this is, part of the ancillary effect that's going to go on. First of all, like, just talk about the baseline CHIP Act, the manner in which that money is going to get distributed and the amount of which, chip manufacturers are going to get it. No one is necessarily going to get enough to go run off and build their own foundry, right? Intel got whatever chunk of money it was going to get allocated, and then it went after an additional funding round, right, with investors to pick up some extra money to build a foundry. And I think may have also went after some venture capital as well. And so, we're going to continue seeing kind of the aftershocks of the CHIP Act, right, as all these companies kind of gear up to actually do something about it. The other thing that has gone on is, the United States is becoming more and more increasingly wary of just the sheer amount of electronics manufacturing that happens out of China, and with the manner in which the chip shortage is impacting a lot of industries, not just the electronics industry, but also the auto industry, right, is severely underwater right now because cars run on chips and there aren't enough chips to go around. So if you've tried to recently buy a new car, many times, a lot of dealerships are at 50% of their average inventory that they would normally have. Cars have to be ordered. Different car manufacturers are going through a reprioritization of what specific models are built. In some cases, there are models that are less chip intensive than others, and so those models are being prioritized. In some cases, the models that sell really well but are very chip intensive may alternately be prioritized. And so, some other vehicles that don't sell as well but also need chips aren't getting made. And so it's just a really interesting state of affairs around the industry. But one thing that's a problem is that for all the products that the United States, quote unquote, makes, all of those chips, right, almost all of those chips are produced outside of the country. And so, not only does the current White House administration want those manufacturers to build chips in the U.S., but they also don't want them leaking money otherwise outside of the country to invest in foundries in other nations being reinforced. And so one of the things that that the I think this is the U.S. Commerce. I mean, yeah. So U.S. Commerce Secretary put down a new requirement that any funds any funds coming out of the CHIP Act cannot be utilized in a way that they feel will compromise national security. And so manufacturers are not allowed to invest that money in China. They can't, newer chips also cannot be exported to China for a period of 10 years. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, it means I'm going to have to go back and do my homework on where exactly some of these companies are incorporated, because I thought in many cases some of these companies like NVIDIA I thought they were incorporated in Taiwan. They're actually incorporated in the U.S. And so NVIDIA, for instance, is on the leading edge of so first of all, obviously, NVIDIA is on the leading edge of making GPUs that are heavily used, in the cloud for AI and machine learning. They do a lot of great things, but the one thing they don't do is they don't really own the server market. And so one of their more advanced boards was supposed to launch to do exactly that. I think it's the H100 board. Well, now these restrictions, which aren't just on building new foundries, but are also on the export of technology manufacturing, may come under limits, right, in terms of their ability to export that out for China to actually build the board, which will limit the number that they are able to make, which will limit their ability to gain revenue from the server market, which is then going to trickle down and impact other things, right? And so all of this kind of culminates in what I expect, a lot of other things are going on. TSMC raised supply part processes for lots of its key customers, which is going to kick in 2023. Other foundries, Global Foundry has also increased prices. And so, as we roll into next year, if the recessionary dynamics continue to take place on the economy, you've got these restrictions coming out of the CHIP Act, which is going to limit U.S. manufacturers in how they can maneuver, and is going to kind of force them down the path of making longer-term investments to get the U.S. corporate machine kind of spun up, with foundries. And then you've got these other prices that have already been raised from global manufacturers. So obviously, the PlayStation 5 price increase, there was a loud outcry about that. But you know what? This may be a good point to upgrade for PC gamers. This may be a good point for people who are looking to buy consumer electronics, because I expect overall that prices are going to increase next year. And so for all the people who have kind of run around and claimed that, when the Oculus Quest price went up and when the PlayStation 5 price went up, that it was an unprecedented event and that consumer electronics have never increased in price before, which is actually not true. But for all the people who have that impression, you may want to go out and buy those electronics now, because there's a very, very, very good chance that their prices are going to increase next year. And there's a very good chance that anything going into in any kind of tech refresh or rollover, that those prices will be going up next year as well.
So Lee, stay on the mic here, and let's move from one overseas investment to another. So we had an update from Ubisoft and Tencent in terms of increasing their investment in Ubisoft. Tencent started their investment and partnership with Ubisoft back in 2018. For a few years, Ubisoft was fighting off Vivendi from a hostile takeover. In 2018, when Tencent stepped in to help bolster and invest in Ubisoft, that kind of put the stake in the heart of Vivendi's takeover. And since then, they have continued to increase some. And so we've got some news story here of some additional investment from Tencent.
Yep. So things are confusing as ever around the industry. And so in this case, what Tencent actually bought into was Guillermo Brothers Limited, which is basically, I don't want to give it too much of a connotation, but essentially it is I would call it a shell company. It's a big holding company. Now, you'll see this a lot of times in tech where um, there are companies that are set up to do things such as hold patents, for instance. And so the kind of primary corporation is not the holder of the patent, right? And so if you legally go after somebody for patent infringement, sometimes you're not going after that company, or a team that is essentially a very litigious team will sometimes buy a lot of patents, and there'll be this big holding company, and they won't actually be like a company. They'll just hold a bunch of patents. Embracer, right, is kind of sort of a little bit this way, not as far as the patent thing goes, but as far as just being a big kind of publishers clearinghouse, right, where they own a lot of developers, but the way in which they manage them is not your traditional publisher owner, right, developer owner kind of perspective, right? They're not funding all of those studios as overhead and like leasing out office buildings for 230 studios, right? In a lot of cases, they just have a publishing arrangement. And so, the Guillermo Brothers Limited Holdings, I think they're called, Guillermo Brothers Limited, is basically that. And then that company has a significant stake in Ubisoft. And so what Tencent bought was roughly just under 50% of Guillermo Brothers Limited. They didn't buy 50% of Ubisoft. What that gives them is that gives that combined block of Tencent and the Guillermo Brothers some degree of voting sway within the Ubisoft corporate structure. Now, what they didn't buy a right to veto various things that come across the Ubisoft board's desk. And specifically, I think they also got barred. So they're not gaining a seat on the board of directors of Ubisoft. And I think they got barred for some period of time from doing anything of that nature. Essentially, what this does is it kind of establishes, if you will, kind of a stay of execution, if you want to use that analogy, of Tencent really doing anything more aggressive as far as Ubisoft is concerned for a period of time. And so for some number of years, you're not going to see Tencent buy Ubisoft. However, what they have established is a very big voting block of influence, right, within Ubisoft. And so this may be a way for the Guillermo brothers to kind of hold some, larger degree of power until such time as they are willing to sell to Tencent, or they take the company private. Could be another option. We saw Dell do that several years ago, so that they could go off and do things that they can't do when you have a bunch of people insisting that they have a vote. Stranger things have happened in tech, so it'll just be kind of interesting to see how this pans out.
All right. And that ties nicely in with some of the announcements from Ubisoft's Forward event, where they have some mobile games coming out in the Chinese market that Tencent is pushing out. So let's move into some of the things that were announced at the Ubisoft Forward event. Oh, I'm just going to run down some of the list here, gentlemen, and feel free to pop in at any point in time, because we've got multiple Assassin's Creed games that have some announcement, not necessarily any date, but we get a lot of kind of settings and names. So there is the newest Assassin's Creed coming in 2023, Assassin's Creed Mirage, which was leaked and officially confirmed now. It is using a character from Valhalla, and it is set before the events of Valhalla over in Baghdad. Then we get the setting of the next Assassin's Creed, which is then going to be in China. No, in Japan. Oh, so many of them. Yes, we have feudal Japan that has Assassin's Creed uh codename Red, then codename Hex, which is some type of witch trial setting, but again, no dates, no real gameplay other than just kind of announcements. Then we get the Tencent one, the mobile game, codename Jade, which is set in ancient China. And then we still get some other Assassin's Creed announcements around around the Netflix show and Assassin's Creed Infinite or Infinity, which is basically a hub of all your Assassin's Creeds. Tao, were you about to jump in when I was struggling here with which of the 6 different Assassin's Creeds were announced?
No, you got it. When
All right.
I think when you mixed up the China and Japan one.
Yes, right. I knew
You
they were
got it.
both. It was just which
Yeah.
code name. Again, not even titles, just code names. So
Yep.
this is a lot of kind of setting the table. I think it also helps to justify the trying to justify the Infinite platform in terms of tying all these things together, having, they kind of hint at some facts that there's going to be some crossover and that they may bring in others to other assassins from previous franchises or previous installments into the Infinite platform in a variety of ways. So, but moving off of all this Assassin's Creed stuff, but then we get a whole bunch of Tom Clancy stuff. A lot more than I expected as well. There was more Division talk here than definitely expected. There's still supporting Division 2. It's getting season 10. There is the mobile spinoff Division Resurgence, which is now actually taking some signups for closed beta. We knew that Division Heartland was coming. That was announced last year, this spring. I don't remember when, but that's the PvP game that's set on track still to come sometime, probably this fiscal year, so sometime before March. And then we also had the announcement of a mobile Rainbow Six game. So again, the Tencent story makes a whole lot of sense when they've got 3 big franchises pushing into the mobile space for worldwide release. Now, I was surprised about the Division 2 still getting support, but I'm even more surprised that the Crew 2 is still getting supported. Riders Republic comes out with a new season. And then we get, in terms of another racing game, Trackmania is coming to consoles for the first time, I think. I don't remember it coming any other time.
There was
Oh,
another one.
all right.
Yeah, that was
Oh,
on
yes. Yeah,
Xbox.
yes, there was. Yeah, Trackmania Turbo or something. Yes. Yep. I do remember that. So yes, we get another Trackmania coming here. Confirmation that Skull and Bones is coming out November 8th, and that the Mario plus Rabbids coming out in October is getting some Rayman DLC. Gentlemen, anything here that surprised you, struck you, anything we want to dive further into?
I mean, my only comments are it's nice to see Assassin's Creed, or at least one of the Assassin's Creeds, going back to its roots, right? I mean, it's long been ballyhooed that there have been some subset of the demographic of the market that likes Assassin's Creed who have not enjoyed the open world RPG like turn that it took. So it's really interesting to see, basically what they said was, look, if we have 2 different groups of people who are made happy by 2 different approaches, then let's do both. Because up until now, it seemed like it was one or the other. So it's really engaging and interesting to see them both happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like there's a big enough market potentially for both of those, and it's nice to have. And maybe that's why we have so many announcements with codename Hex and codename Jade. Codename Red, that we are going to see one of them being more open world, one of them being more tightly confined, traditional, which is Mirage, coming out next year.
Right. And then the only other thing is, I mean, Ubisoft to me is the Nickelback of gaming right now. It's like lots of people who loved Ubisoft and loved Ubisoft games are suddenly, participating in revisionist history and saying that they were never great, which, I'll just always disagree with. Those games reviewed well and those games sold well, and now everyone seems to want to go back and use some type of critical gaming theory to overwrite past history, which I think is inappropriate. But the fact of the matter is that we are a skosh down the ladder from where a few years ago, this cast itself often commented that going into like an E3, we were like, we don't really care what the console manufacturers have to say. Like, the really big deal we want to see is what Ubisoft comes with, and they're well out of that zeitgeist now. So it's interesting to see them trying to kind of climb back up the ladder. So it'll be curious to see kind of how things evolve over the next few years.
Yeah, I think, the reliance on kind of not I mean, at this point, they've thinned down their catalog quite a bit, right? You have a few Tom Clancy franchises, you've got some racing aspects, you've got, I think really, Skull and Bones is the first time that they're kind of breaking out of that mold, and doing something a little bit. But even that's built on the backs of Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag, and to some degree. So yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how these various different kind of points of the franchises, how they fall and what those mobile experiences look like. But given the way that mobile games are right now, it can certainly be a full-fledged Assassin's Creed in maybe not necessarily in an open world setting, but in more of the tighter confined stealth aspects of things. All right, let's move from Ubisoft's announcement over to Disney and all their announcements on Disney. What is that? Their Disney 23 D23. So, Tao, you're already jumping on the mic here. So, since you dove into Disney Dreamlight Valley and now are excited that there's some Toy Story content being announced for it as well. Anything else from
Yes.
the D3 D23 game section? There was a lot of other media that was announced here as well, but let's stick with games on the Disney Marvel aspects.
Yeah, I'll just go through kind of the highlights from the digital trends article I got all this from. Because this is mostly like the new stuff I'll go through, and most of the other stuff was kind of just added on stuff for existing games already. And I didn't realize they're going to have a game showcase until like the day before. I was like, oh, okay. At first, I thought it was just the regular TV show, movies, and stuff, but this is just games. But first up, we have a Tron game, Tron Identity, coming to PC through Steam next year, 2023, from Mike Bithell, if that's how you say his name. He's an indie developer that did Thomas Was Alone and John Wick Hex. There's not a whole lot of information right now. It's just kind of like a super quick teaser, like no gameplay or not even like a CGI thing or anything really. So we'll have to see. It looks like it might be more of a narrative game, but like I said, we'll have to see. There wasn't a whole lot right now. Another one that looks pretty cool actually is Disney Illusion Island. And this was from the Battletoads developers. And this is actually coming to Switch next year, 2023. Another one. So kind of co-op. You can play Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, and Donald, kind of just going through this world. So looks pretty cool. Looks kind of a cartoony animation graphics here. So looks like it almost kind of reminded me of like kind of the Mario. What was the Mario series where you can have like 4 people? So it's just not Super Mario World, but
New Super Mario Brothers.
New Super Mario. Yeah, where
Yep,
you kind of just
that
kind of working
side-scrolling
together.
platform. Yep.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. We got a date for Marvel's Midnight Suns, which had been delayed. This is coming out December 2nd now of this year. So that should be hopefully that'll stick because I think they've had a couple delays now.
I think
We have any
since they gave the date, it's definitely gonna stick, right? Because this is the game that was supposed to come
yeah,
out in March, then got delayed to the fall, then got
yeah,
delayed to say it's gonna come out this fiscal year, which many people thought it meant early 23. And so now that they've stuck a date
yeah.
to it, I would be shocked if if it gets pushed again.
So hopefully we'll see that, and then just kind of had a new trailer and gameplay trailer and all the characters you can play. So, and then we have Amy Hennig's Marvel game. It's Black Panther and Captain America. This was just like a CG trailer that they showed. It looks like it'll be in during World War II. So we're not, but don't know if it's like an action adventure game or first person shooter or whatever it's going to be. But they've announced that. And then the last new one is Niantic, which does Pokemon Go. They're actually doing Marvel World of Heroes, which looks like you will create your own character, maybe, or somehow, deal with Marvel characters throughout the real world AR world. So we'll have to see what that is. That's also coming out. Supposed to launch sometime in 2023 also. So I think pretty much all of these are next year, except for Midnight Suns, I believe. As far as like the new stuff that they announced.
Yeah, I think so, right? Because they gave the things that are coming this year are updates to things like Disney Mirrorverse on mobile, Dreamlight Valley, Disney Speedstorm is getting some early access release. That's the Mario Kart free to play Game Loft one again as well.
There was a few other new ones. Marvel Snap, which I think it was just a mobile game. Kind of like a card game, I
Yes.
believe.
So this is the one I'm most excited about, actually, because it's a Marvel card game, but it's by developers that have left Hearthstone and that have partnered up, and it's coming out October 18th. So that's really the fact that it's coming out this quickly. It'll be interesting to see if that's an early access out or if that's a full on release. So it's been in a beta and some closed betas over the course of the summer as well.
Yeah, and then they did show some Avatar gameplay for the mobile and the normal Frontiers of Pandora, which is just the normal, I guess, MMO. I guess that's supposed to be of some sort. You got the Gargoyles Remastered coming out from old. I don't remember if I ever played that one back.
It's
in
just
the
a
day or
side
not.
scroller. It's a Genesis
Yeah.
game. No images though. No date. So that would
Yeah, they just showed like the
yeah.
old gameplay. And that was it. So. And Disney Mirrorverse, which I don't know if was ever shown on
It's a mobile
anywhere.
game. Yeah, it's out on
Oh,
mobile
is that
now
what a
already.
mobile game?
Yep.
Okay.
So it's a kind of gotcha battler type of mobile game with your Disney characters all kind of combatified and different skins. So if you don't know it, that's okay. Lee, anything here that you want to take a stab at and comment on?
Nope, nothing to add.
Well, then stay on the mic and give us the updates on PlayStation Store's downloads here for August.
Yeah, so fairly interesting how the tale of the tape went this past month. And so at the top of the list in the U.S. Were Madden NFL 23 at first, Saints Row at second, then followed by Grand Theft Auto, Cult of the Lamb, Stray in at fifth, MLB The Show, Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, Roller Drome was at 11th. Thymesia was at 12th, Elden Ring at 14th, Elder Scrolls 5 Special Edition at 16th, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order still clocks in at 17th, which is really surprising.
They had some real deep discounts, so
yeah,
that's probably how it hits there.
I can see that. I won't bother talking about the PlayStation 4 games, other than what was most remarkable to this past month on the PlayStation 5 to me was the fact that despite all the hate that you saw and read about it online, Saints Row comes in as the second most downloaded game for the PlayStation 5 in that month, and it was fifth for PS4. That's fairly impressive, particularly considering the install base of the PlayStation 4, and the number of people who consume that game, and right, wrong, or indifferent weren't apparently deterred by some of the negative reviews that came out about it.
So I'm really curious how much of that is pre-orders, right? Like, how many of those sales came pre-release, and how many then came after the negative press? Which we don't have those numbers, but that's definitely a question that I had.
So my feeling is I don't know that I would think that would statistically wind up with a statistically significant right behavior of pre-ordered and then was unsatisfied by Saints Row. Because if you onboarded with Saints Row, despite a lot of the despite the different social take that the game had, and despite how you felt about the gameplay that was shown in terms of whether or not you felt it was just more Saints Row again, or that there were changes in the gameplay that didn't, some people claim, didn't look all that exciting. Whatever. I don't know that I would predict that a lot of people who pre-ordered it and held on to right, because you can cancel your pre-order at any time, including after the game releases, right? So, and the buzz about this game was out before it even launched, right? So the embargo lifted before launch time. So I'm taking it away right now as, again, as this is a thing that I tend to voice very frequently these days. When I was embedded with the live stream community, right, I walked away from that experience and often comment on how the live streaming community thinks that they have a pulse of what consumers want from a gaming perspective, and they just vastly don't. You look at what, as I mentioned before, what trends on Twitch, and it is not equivalent to what is critically rated, on any review board that you go to, or is raking in tons of revenue either by sales or live services. In most cases, by the same token, Twitter, I think, has vastly lost touch with what is representative of the market, and the trends in its conversations are often antithetical to what's actually happening. And so this seems to be a very good indicator of where, if you looked at the Twitter conversation, you would think that Saints Row was not doing well. And this could always be the honeymoon month, and then there could be a precipitous drop off. I would say Saints Row has exactly until God of War Ragnarok releases to right get whatever it can get from PlayStation fans on PlayStation 5. I will say, I feel what this is indicative of is not a lot of other releases on PlayStation 5 that are next gen. And so, Saints Row, had an ability to kind of squeeze in there, which again, that's not bad, right? Because they strategically chose that release date, and it seems to have panned out well. That's not a free game, so most downloaded in at number 2 on PlayStation 5 means that a bunch of people who own PlayStation 5s paid for that game. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes and how it performs. Once we see the NPD charts and hear the quarterly earnings reports.
Tom, any comments here? Anything that surprises you from this list?
No, other than Saints Row and kind of Cyberpunk being in there too. I'm assuming there was a discount on that one also. Okay, that's what I figured. Yeah, that was pretty much it.
Well, I think you also had the resurgence because the next gen versions, right, came out.
They've been out. Yeah, they were out for a couple weeks or a couple months at this point. But yeah, I do think it was a sale of the weekend at one point, like a 50% off as well. So, well, let's move from PlayStation over to Xbox, and how you've got an Xbox controller announcement here.
Yeah, so there's a couple things actually on this IGN article that I have here. So they are making a cheaper Elite 2 controller. So this would be called the Core controller, and basically it's the same exact controller that as they have out now, the Series 2 that's out now, but it doesn't come with all the bells and whistles. So you just get the thumbstick adjustment tool and just a USB-C cable, and that's it. So you don't get like the extra paddles. I'm assuming you don't get any paddles. You don't get any of the extra thumbsticks that you can swap out, or the additional D-pads also. So it's just the controller as is. So it comes in at $129.99 US dollars. So I believe it's about $50 cheaper than the regular Series 2, which is $179.99. And then they also have mentioned that they're going to you're going to be able to customize your Elite 2 controller in the Xbox Design Labs. There has been no price on that yet, so we'll have to see how that goes. So I think a normal one was $80, I believe, when you do it through the Design Labs, and and a normal controller probably goes for what, 60, just normal, like if you buy it on the stores. So that's like a $20 bump up. So I don't know if they'll do that same $20 for the Series 2, or if they're going to make it a little bit more, or like how that's going to go. But they haven't mentioned any price yet. So believe that should come out probably within the holiday season here. So it's just kind of interesting that they have this core kind of controller now, trying to make it a little bit cheaper, I guess, to kind of compete with some of the other controllers that are out there, scuff controllers, or maybe even like the obviously not directly with PS5's new controller, but just to kind of get something out there that's a little bit cheaper to people to get. Still, not super cheap, but I mean it's better than $180, $130, I guess. So it kind of nice that you can actually will be able to customize it. And in another article I had got, so you'll be able to just to customize just the base color of the controller, so you won't be able to do the rubberized grips like you can with or the grips, because they're not rubberized on the normal controller. The thumbsticks or the bumpers, those are all remain just a black color. But I'm assuming that they didn't mention the buttons, so I'm assuming the buttons you can kind of configure as you were, and possibly the start. Oh, I guess the hamburger button or whatever they call it now. Start and select button is what I call it now, and not the stream, but the like video capture button, and probably the triggers. So we'll have to see how that looks, I guess. But because it's kind of weird, like the core, the new Series 2 core is the white base with the black grips. I don't know, it looks kind of weird to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. It looks a little off. I don't know why, but it'll be interesting to see how that looks when you have like a weird, like like purple or red or something, and then just the black grips. So it's kind of strange, but I guess it'd be more expensive if you started doing that rubberized grip too. So I'm sure they want to try to keep the cost down. I don't know if you guys had anything on that. I think Lee, you had not the series obviously, but you've bought Xbox Design Labs, correct, controllers before, at least one or two.
I have both. Yeah, so I have 2 Design Labs controllers from the Xbox One era and 2 from this era, and I do have an Xbox wireless Elite controller 2, Series 2, as well. My comments on this is like, I don't know who this is for. Like, if you're gonna go for an extra special controller, my pitch would be just get a Design Labs controller, because I don't know that what you get with the core really improves your experience all that much. And I don't think that and I definitely don't think that it's going to improve your gameplay that much without all of the other bits and bobs that you get with the kit. And so other than like for people who might be economically challenged, right, to buy the full controller right off the bat, and so maybe you buy the core now, right, and then you buy the kit, a few months down the road or something like that. But other than that, I just really don't know who this is for.
And then that was the other thing. They have the complete component pack that you can buy like separately for $60. Which has all that other extra stuff. If you want to buy that later on, but yeah, it's a little weird. So one question I had, because since you have a Series 2, what's the thumbstick adjustment tool? I'm not sure, because I don't think I didn't have that on the Series 1.
Yeah, so what you can do is the analog sticks, you can actually tighten up the play on them, so they give you more resistance. Okay. So. And so I use it, and that in turn therefore makes them more precise, right? Because for a smaller range of movement, you're able to make a smaller range of movement and maintain accuracy. So I keep them tightened up all the way, all the time anyway. But I specifically do it for first person shooters, right? For competitive PvP, because they allow me to play with a lot more accuracy. It's kind of essentially the analog stick equivalent of reducing the DPI on your mouse, right? So as you make your mouse less sensitive, it becomes more precise, but it moves slower, and so you kind of have that same kind of effect here on the stick, but it doesn't, at least for me, it doesn't impact me as far as, making my turning rate any slower. But it does definitely like way improve my accuracy in like a Call of Duty or a Halo.
Nice. All right. Tao, you hinted at this in terms of what you've been playing that has taken you away from Disney Dreamlight Valley. I just can't let it go. But
I can't.
Splatoon 3, you picked up Splatoon 3 and are still ink deep in it. How about that?
Yeah. Yes. Very good. Yeah. So I did get Splatoon 3. I shouldn't say I've come to realization because I kind of knew this already and maybe I forgot about it. But man, I am terrible at this game when it comes to the PvP aspect of it. Um, so I had actually played with and on another Discord server. There's like a whole group of people that they are like super into us. They were super into Splatoon 2, and I think the first one too. I didn't get into it until Splatoon 2 though. And I was playing with them yesterday for Saturday, and man, they were just wiping the floor with me. Like I could barely even get, on a kill at a time. So I just, and it even kind of goes over when I just play with the randoms too. It's like, I don't know what it is. Like, maybe it's just cause it's not like, you shoot ink, so it's not going to be going flying, across the screen. So there is like drop down, like kind of majorly depending on which kind of weapon you're using. But I don't know if I just can't get used to that, or it could be the third person too. I always have problems with third person PvP games, even with Fortnite and stuff, and like PUBG. Well, PUBG is a little different because I can switch to first person on that one. But I've always had problems with third person action game or shooting games. So I think that's part of it too, or a bigger part of it. But just Splatoon is just kind of a different kind of a shooter. So and, you don't have to go for the kills, and that's what I don't. Most of the time when I'm playing, at least the regular turf war match, you just want to ink up the arena as much as you can. So I pretty much kind of try to do that as much as I can. But one mode that I'm actually playing a lot of, which is kind of weird, is the card battle game in Splatoon 3, which I totally forgot about until I was kind of just like going around the little hub world that you start in, and I found the little the card table there, and it's kind of a mix between Splatoon 3 because you have to like get as much of the map that you're in as possible, but it kind of throws in some Tetris like play in there too. So you have like so you have your different cards, and the cards are more of just like the shapes that you get in each match. So you might have like a plus sign, you might have like just a straight column, you might have a column almost like an L, but then there's all these other like funky little shapes that they throw in there too, and those are all the cards basically that you're getting. And you have to you play each card, and you can move it on the map, and sometimes the map's just like a rectangle, sometimes it's a plus sign too. And so the maps are a bit different too. So you kind of have to strategize how you want to kind of block your opponent, because you're basically, it's like a turn-based thing. You kind of go one after another, and you have to fill up as much as the space as you can. So I have been kind of addicted to that part of it. So it's just kind of nice, and kind of I didn't think it was going to be part of it. But so I've been playing a lot of that more than anything else in Splatoon 3 this last few days since it came out Friday. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. And right now, I was reading that you couldn't play multiplayer, but I was able to like when you're going around the hub world, you can click on a person. They'll have like real people there, but they're it's just like their avatar. You could look at their gear. If you like the gear, you can order it. But now I just noticed, and I don't know if it's just in the card battle area or if I have to go into some of the other parts of the hub world and check this out too. But there was an actual option to play that person. So I don't know if you're like almost like a Drivatar, or like in Forza, like it's just like kind of a representation of that what they maybe like what their decks that they use. So I was kind of doing that earlier today. So because I was looking online, and it said you can't like just go up to somebody or in that mode, kind of like go against live people. So maybe that's, like I said, it's just like an avatar of them and their deck that they use. Probably maybe the last time they played it or something like that. So it's a lot of fun. I'm liking it so far.
Nice. That's good. I didn't even realize there was a little deck card aspect in there. So
Yeah, when every time they mentioned it was always kind of like an afterthought when they were talking about it. So I don't know. It seemed like it was well known or well marketed.
yeah, fair enough. All right. Well, I suppose they do want people spending most of their time in the multiplayer to keep those population counts up.
Yeah.
I have been spending my time with a small little indie game called NeoDrift. It's a singular developer. It's a kind of racing in kind of a techno neon aspect, but you are also kind of there's a running wall, basically a collision point that's chasing you. And so you need to keep your speed up. You've got kind of not a you've got kind of jets to fire around corners to maintain your speed and take a hard corner. So a little bit different from kind of traditional video game racing drifting. And then you also have your car, because it's futuristic, has the ability to do some hovering as you take jumps off to stay on the track. So there's this kind of speed run aspect, there's this procedural generated aspect of things, there's multiple paths. It's got a great techno soundtrack, and it's something that I can pick up, play a few races of, put it back down, come back to it. It's a nice kind of just both. While the music is nice and dry, there is this chill aspect of it, but because of the tension, there's some white knuckled aspect there too. So it's a good motivation to keep going, kind of try a track, and you've got some branches, but there's also kind of a zen mode to it where you can get rid of the wall and just learn some of the courses and some of the physics. So then there's two different modes. You can have that kind of time based run, and then also basically just treat it as a straight on race. Lee, you've been playing another racing game with a lot of neon in it as well, but this was one of PlayStation Plus's free games last month, Need for Speed Heat.
Yep, very true. And so I'm pretty sure I've started Need for Speed Heat before, or at least booted it. Um, I don't think I spent any time with it because as I started playing it, I'm like, I don't even remember this first race. But my feeling as I come away from it is I feel a little more out of that game than I think the critical reviews would have allowed me to suspect. That game is free on PlayStation Plus this month, and so that's how it kind of came across my radar. And obviously it's incorporated in the service. So I pulled it down through that access, and I don't feel like the controls are as tight as some other races. As I mentioned, I played Race Driver Grid this week, and my feeling is kind of between those two. The heart of the physics model of racing is much more so with Grid. I feel like Grid is a lot more of a driving sims fan kind of game. Neither of these are sims. They're both on the arcadey end of the spectrum, but the one that is closer to that end of the spectrum, I feel like, is Grid. Need for Speed Heat has a lot more of the car owner's spirit that goes into it. It is very much in recent decades, if you think of kind of old school Need for Speed versus modernized Need for Speed, pretty much since Need for Speed Underground came around, this is a game that harkens back to that, Too Fast, Too Furious kind of, living that lifestyle. And I find that appealing and enjoyable, as much more so as I am more of a purist when it comes to racing games. I enjoy that racing game that puts just as much emphasis on kind of blinging out your ride as it does on you modifying it for performance. And in some ways, it does that better than a Forza, which doesn't really do, I feel like, it that much about the cars cosmetically, other than the paint schemes. But I feel like there's a lot more love and care and a lot more of that street racer kind of ethos around Need for Speed when you look at the types of cosmetics that it gives you access to and the types of kind of loving care and detail that you're able to put on your car to make it a really individual piece of kit. and I find that, and so I find that that's there, right, in Need for Speed. Whereas I've mentioned, that franchise feels like it stumbled out of the gate, right, for several instances, for everything it's done since Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. And so it's kind of good to see the game like kind of climb back on that ladder. The buzz around it is still bad, and that's why I blew it off right 4 years ago. But I'm enjoying my time coming back to it now. I've been playing it on the PlayStation 5, and we continuously forget, myself included in that that supposedly we're still getting a new Need for Speed game sometime this year before December 31st. So, and if Need for Speed Heat is kind of an indicator, it's at least showing an attempt to get back to what Need for Speed was. So, maybe they'll be able to platform off of that this time. DBQ, were you gonna add something?
No, I forgot that there was a Need for Speed coming. So yes, thank you for reminding me.
Yeah. I mean, and they're not talking about it a lot, and maybe that's a good thing. So we'll just see how it goes. It's always a cheesy, campy story associated with these things, but again, it feels like it's a story. I still hold that Need for Speed Most Wanted, the original Most Wanted before when it was not Criterion. But the one with like the black Mustang on the album art cover, I still feel like that's one of the best Need for Speeds that there's ever been. And it feels like Heat is getting back to that. It's a lot less of the Most Wanted oriented, just drive at the speed of light and crash into things if need be. That combination of Need for Speed and Burnout, which I didn't really care for. But it brings you back to that thrill of the chase, and when a cop detects you, that feeling is there. It feels a lot like Need for Speed Carbon, which was the Need for Speed that launched on the PlayStation 4. A lot of people weren't as hyped on that one. I felt like Rivals, which was the last one that I felt like was really decent, improved upon the Carbon formula. But I'm playing the game very carefully, because the thing about Carbon is, over the course of your career, you could really run out of out of headroom on your upgrade path, right? Carbon was really a game that really said...
Are you thinking of Rivals?
No,
Rivals was the first. Carbon was a 2006 release.
Carbon... Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's... So Carbon was the launch one on the PlayStation 3. I'm sorry, I said PlayStation 4. Rivals was the launch one on the PlayStation 4. So I did actually like Carbon. Carbon to me was a step down from previous Need for Speeds, and then they really caught their stride when they turned it over to Criterion for Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. But I still liked Carbon, and then Rivals felt like an improvement on the Carbon formula with a little bit intermixed of Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. But the thing with Carbon was, as you progressed, there was essentially, if you could see the Excel spreadsheet, right, with the way the financial model worked, there's essentially a max that you were going to be able to progress on an upgrade path. And so Carbon was really about hitting a certain car on that upgrade path and then upgrading it right all the way through, because at a certain point, if you bought a newer car too late, you wouldn't have enough time to upgrade it right before you got to endgame. So I'm proceeding into Need for Speed Heat very wary that is there, because it just feels spiritually like a lot like Carbon. So I'm not just buying cars all over the place, but we'll see how it goes. And then the last game that I've been playing was Back 4 Blood. So I know, Tao, you were playing this a few weeks ago as well. It turns out when I pulled up, synchronization was my past record. I've never actually played this game since it launched. I only played it during the demo.
Yeah, the three of us played it during the demo.
Yeah. And I was very lukewarm on it after the demo. But coming back to it, I'm actually pretty happy with it. I've just happened to fall in with a good crew. I started the game off. I wanted to go all the way back to the beginning. So I started off at the beginning of Act 1. And so I initially went into my run with a bunch of bots. But about the second level in the game, I had some humans, pop in. And They were not the type of people who just run and gun through a level, right, and just speed like lightning, light years past you. They didn't take it quite as ploddingly as slow as I normally would, but they didn't just run through the level as quickly as possible, which is the problem that I always have when you play with randos. And actually, when we wrapped up our session, which ends right when you get to the encampment, right with the general, they actually stayed and let me watch like the cutscene right through its entirety. And it's a long cutscene when you get there. And when I came out of the cutscene, they were actually still in the lobby, sitting there waiting on me. Unfortunately, I had to drop at that point, so I felt kind of bad. But it was neat. And that crew also, we found the entrance to. I think they already knew where it was, but we found the entrance to the hive. And so even I ran all 4 missions in that Act 1, but I also then went down into the hive, and actually like came out of it, having grabbed. I didn't figure out the skull thing until later in the level. So when you go into the hive, you can go down, I think 2 additional levels. I think there's 3 levels at least on that first one. So we went down right to the lowest level of the hive, defeated all the bosses, on each level. And then in the last level, I finally caught on to the skulls thing, and actually grabbed a 3 skull, melee weapon or whatever, and captured it. And captured that reward or whatever as the level. In fact, actually, I was standing on the thing that would have allowed us to extract with 2 skulls on my totem, and they like one guy actually wouldn't go and I was like, come on man, let's get out of here. And he actually wouldn't, and he stood there and was like shooting at something on the ground, and I was like, what is he do? I was like, oh, that's a 3rd skull. Oh yeah, if I capture the 3rd skull, it'll be a bigger reward. So I, came off the thing, got the 3rd skull, and then went back, and lo and behold, yeah, that was when he, went to the portal or whatever, so that we could extract. So it was a pretty neat experience. At the end of the day, so my thing, the whole reason I was sketchy on the Back 4 Blood formula was, I was like, okay, this is going to be the Left 4 Dead formula, but it's going to have some progression in it. And I didn't grok like what their whole plan was with that. And at the end of the day, I still dislike. I love the persistence of Call of Duty and Destiny 2, right? Gaining weapons, gaining unlocks. But this whole thing of like you upgrade a weapon, and then you come out of the mission and you don't have any upgraded weapons, right? That still doesn't sit well with me. And Tao, I need to talk to you a little bit to discuss like the reward system and unlocks, because I came back and unlocked a bunch of stuff in that little supply crate screen. But it didn't result in me having like any new cards or any new outfits or any new weapons. So I'm like, well, what's the point? So there's obviously something in the progression system that I'm missing. But I had a good time. It performed well. I played it on PC, played it on my system with the RTX 3060. It ran great. So I'm pretty happy with it, and I'm likely to play it again some more.
That's great. That's a great co-op experience with some random people that create a positive environment. So thanks for sharing that experience. It has been a while since I've played that as well. We enjoyed our time with a beta of it. But Tao, anything else from you before we wrap things up for the night?
No, that's it. I was just saying maybe we can jump on that someday if we all have it.
Yeah.
Well, it's on Game Pass, so I mean,
it is on Game Pass. Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So this has been episode 258. Lee, you are hosting next week, so get ready. But no, yes, we will be back next week here on the Enough to Keep Going podcast. All 3 of us probably will be back here with more games and more news to talk about, as we do every week here on Enough to Keep Going. For myself, DBQ Hams, Lee, and Tao, thank you for joining us, whether you're listening, watching now, whether you join us in your ears, on your screens at some other point in time. Feel free to come back. We are here every Sunday evening to talk through the previous week's news and games. But until then, model yourself after Lee. Have some good co-op experiences. Play some things. Be kind to those that you are playing with, and enjoy your time online. Good night, everyone.
I'm looking for that vintage flame. But all complexions that I adore, so hard to find, these seem impossible.